Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:07. It's O'Connor and Company here on a super busy Wednesday morning as we are wrapping up yesterday's confirmation hearings of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, and also giving you some previews for the inauguration on Monday. To that end, in 30 minutes, Cal Thomas will be here. He's seen his fair share of presidential inaugurations. Then at 7:05, we'll speak with Matt Whitlock, a Republican strategist, to give us his opinion of Hegseth's performance. And then at 8:35, we'll talk to Christian Toto, who has learned now that the Reagan movie, which is very popular with viewers, will not be eligible for an Oscar because, well, it's not diverse enough. I'm telling you, Julie, they really should have done that indigenous people's transgender storyline that is so prevalent from 1985 in the Reagan history. It's Julie Gunlock over there and Larry Connor over here for O'Connor and Company. And joining us right now, Garrett Exner. He's with Veterans on Duty and also an adjunct fellow at Hudson Institute. He is the former military legislative assistant to Senator Ted Cruz, and he knows his way around counterterrorism policy also as he worked for the Office of Secretary of Defense. So I guess you know what you're talking about here, Mr. Marine Garrett Exner. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Listen, we just played a lot of audio from yesterday's hearing, and one thing kept sort of resonating, that Pete Hegseth certainly is not your typical nominee for Secretary of Defense. Democrats don't seem to like that, but what we're hearing from people like you, people who are now referred to as war fighters, you know, the people who actually go in, the actual boots on the ground, you see Hegseth as a bit of a breath of fresh air. Why is that, sir?
I think Americans are just not satisfied, particularly veterans are not satisfied with the way that DOD has been run under the Biden admin. And you said, you know, a typical Secretary of Defense. I think what we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years is that we do not want a typical Secretary of Defense. You see this in recruitment numbers. You see it in polling about trust in the military from the American public. And you definitely see it in polling from veterans who are not recommending the military to their children. That used to be the bread and butter of the American military, and it's falling away now for recruitment numbers. So I think everybody says we need to do something different. There's one thing you can say from the hearing yesterday is that Pete Hegseth loves his country, and that is what I think we see as a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, you know, recruitment issues are really interest me, but so does morale. How do you think current soldiers serving right now feel about this? You know, you've got the Democrats constantly saying, you know, Pete Hegseth hasn't run an organization more than 100 people, and suggesting that he's not qualified, that he's not ready for this, that things will be a disaster. At the same time, you've got people who are really excited about his nomination and thinking that he will bring, you know, he will increase morale among the troops. So how do you think the troops feel about this nominee?
I think broadly they're going to be very supportive. I think the argument that many of the Democrat senators used yesterday, it stunk of elitism.
Yeah.
And it was offensive to say that this guy doesn't have the experience. He has the exact experience of all of our war fighters. He's fought in these two wars, and he had to watch this Afghanistan withdrawal debacle under the Biden admin where nobody was held accountable. All of my friends serving and who have served in the military, all they wanted was accountability for Afghanistan, and nothing has happened. Right. And I think that was one of the best moments yesterday where he said accountability is coming in the Trump Pentagon.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, accountability really is a word you're hearing a lot right now, especially with regard to the Defense Department. We're speaking with Garrett Exner. He was a special ops officer, by the way, at the United States Marine Corps. Hold on, special operations officer, United States Marine Corps. Did you go to the Naval Academy, sir?
I did not. I married into the Naval Academy, so, you know, adjacent to it. Yeah.
That's
My
even
wife
better.
Much like Larry.
Graduate. Yeah.
I got to ask, devil's advocate here, if I may, is it really the job of the Secretary of Defense to look in the rearview mirror and focus on accountability for Afghanistan, not just the pullout, but other things that may have happened over the last 20 years? Or is the primary focus necessarily what's in front of us and what the Pentagon and the Defense Department needs to do from day one looking forward for military intervention and national security? What accountability for the past might not be the role for this position?
Well, I think it's probably somewhere around 80-20, where 80% he needs to be looking forward, and 20% we owe it to our service members who served in Iraq and Afghanistan to get them some accountability for what went wrong. But going forward, that 80% looking forward also entails not making the same mistakes that we made in the past. We all agree across parties that the acquisition system is broken and it needs to be fixed if we're going to have any chance at standing up to China in a World War III scenario. Somebody outside of the defense industry has to come in and take a look at that system. It cannot be the same people who are coming in from the boards of the major defense corporations and coming into the Pentagon and refusing to make any change, or putting blinders on. They don't want to address some of that stuff because they know the job awaits them afterwards. I don't think Pete Hegseth, from anything I've seen in him, has any desire to go work at the board of one of the major defense corporations, who are good companies producing great weapons and great systems, but we have a thriving free market system in America. It's not made for just 5 companies to produce goods for the Pentagon. We should allow that to get spread out to all the different innovators, to VC firms that are backing new weapon systems. We want all of that to be available to the warfighter, just like it was in the past wars that we've won.
Garrett, as a former counterterrorism policy advisor, I'd love to get your thoughts on this breaking news that happened last night. I think they reported on it this morning that Biden has taken Cuba off the state terrorism list. We're seeing a lot of these last-minute things to sort of tie the hands of Trump, or sort of slow down what Trump can do. What are your thoughts on this? And will Trump just immediately reverse this when he gets in office?
I think Trump will absolutely reverse it, particularly with Marco Rubio over at the State Department. I think the way that this administration has handled terrorism, it's actually indicative of kind of a longer policy that dates back to Obama, of appeasement and giving handouts to say, hey, will you stop doing bad things if we give you rewards? And unfortunately, terrorists don't work that way. That's not their mentality on anything. And I think the vast majority of Americans in the world understands this. It's just for a few, I would say elitist Democrats that are here in D.C. that have this idea that maybe if we did something different and we gave them money, we give Iran money, they'll stop attacking people. But it doesn't happen that way. We give Iran money and they actually attack more people. And this is what they're going to do with Cuba. They're going to say, Cuba, you haven't earned this, but we're going to give you a reward here.
Frankly, every parent understands that doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Quickly, sir, I saw somebody, I think it was Governor Scott Walker, who posted on the X platform yesterday that with that appearance at that hearing yesterday, Pete Hegseth, before he even becomes Secretary of Defense, increased and rejuvenated recruitment in our armed forces by tenfold. Would you also say that? But recruitment is a major issue. In fact, I think your Marine Corps is the only division of the military that actually met their recruitment numbers, and one would argue it's because they haven't fully bought into some of the woke policies that the Pentagon's been pushing on them. What do you think is ahead here with regard to recruitment and our fighting force?
I do think it will bounce back. I think it's actually already starting to bounce back. You've seen a little bump in numbers over the last, over November, December. So I think it will come back. I think you'll get more veterans willing to recommend to their children, which I mentioned earlier, is a huge portion of people that are going into the military are second and third generation military members. But I think there's going to be some element of wait and see. Do all the problems get fixed? How long does it take to get them fixed? The academies are a place that a lot of people dream of sending their children. It's free. It's a great education. It's got a great reputation. And over the last few years, people have kind of pulled back from that across the American public. That's probably going to take 6 months, 12 months to unravel some of the DEI woke initiatives that have crept into those places. So I think it will come back. It just is going to take some time, and there needs to be proof out there that, hey, these things are gone. These professors are gone. These initiatives, these hiring initiatives, these promotion initiatives that we've pushed forward, they're going to go away. And once the American people see that, they'll start sending their young men and women back to the military.
Garrett Exner, Veterans on Duty, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you at some Navy football games next season as a very, very happy, grateful guest of your wife who really did the right thing and went to Annapolis. Thank you, Garrett. Good talking with you.
Thank you for having me.
It is 6:17. Let's get to Jamie Whitney with the Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
Dutch, there's a purpose for your life.
You can run from a bully for so long, but after a while, you're going to have to stand up to him.
It's my boy!
There's about to be another war right here in Hollywood. The commies on one side, the mob on the other. And you're right in the middle, son.
If you put as much work into your career as you do making your speeches, you'd have an Oscar by now.
It's a great movie, and it's gotten great audience reactions. We never expected the critics to say anything good about it because it's a biography of Ronald Reagan, after all. They hated him back then, and they hate him now, especially because he was one of their own. But it's a great movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's one of the top streaming movies of the last several months, now that you can access it on streaming, and it's great. But, of course, great movies don't get nominated for Oscars anymore. We know that. If the fans like it, it's probably not going to get nominated. But this year, the Academy has decided that the Reagan biopic is not eligible for any Oscars, even if critics did love it, for one simple reason. It wasn't woke enough. It wasn't diverse enough.
Yeah.
I kid you.
Look,
you cannot make this up.
You can't. Look, the Oscars have gone the way of every other major institution in America. It is woke, and it is disregarded by most Americans who are looking for quality and merit and things that matter. It just doesn't matter anymore. I mean, even the stars that do on the red carpet are all plastic. They've got borrowed clothes, borrowed jewelry. It's not authentic. And Americans, especially young Americans, especially Gen Z, recognize this as just a joke. Nobody watches this stuff anymore.
Christian Toto over at Hollywood in Toto writes that the rules were set up after the fires of the 2020 BLM protests, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences proposed diversity mandates, which went into effect last year. Best Picture hopefuls have to check multiple boxes. For instance, a film has to have diverse crews or tackle subjects pertaining to marginalized groups. Jews, by the way, don't appear on the list of marginalized groups or underrepresented individuals in the crews. Reagan didn't check enough boxes. In fact, according to the Wrap.com, 116 films released last year don't qualify for Best Picture consideration, not because of the quality of the film, but because of the diversity of the storylines or the casting crew and representation there.
Well,
it's incredible.
Yeah, if you look at the trends of Oscars viewership, I mean, we're looking at 2,046 million people watched the Oscars. In 2021, 10 million. I mean, you know, it's climbed up a little bit. It's now up to around 18 million. Again, these organizations hurt themselves with their own wokeism, and I don't see it reversing. I don't see much changing.
In the film business, obviously the Oscars are important. What's really important, though, was winning at the box office. During its theatrical run, Reagan made $30 million, which, by the way, I assure you was well more than the budget for the film. And then in streaming, it's made that much more. So it made bucks after having trouble finding distribution. Good for them, and they don't need the Oscars. Maybe we need to come up with our own version of the Oscars.
Yes,
and just
exactly.
Maybe we'll talk.
Like
I'll
the
talk
Dow
to Matt
Awards.
and Mercedes there. It's 6:20. Oh, Christian Toto, who follows things in Hollywood, he'll be joining us coming up at 8:35. Right now, it's 6:22. A few things we've learned about Donald Trump over the years, and one is that he loves his Diet Coke. In fact, you could say he is addicted to Diet Coke. And, you know, if a politician is going to be addicted to something, Diet Coke is the least of our concerns. Let's face it. In fact, I not that I want to, you know, sort of fly too close to the sun, but this is something that the 45th and 47th president and I share. I cannot get enough of Diet Coke. I am a big Diet Coke guy. think most of us who came of age when Diet Coke replaced Tab, it was the greatest moment of the 20th century. Forget about landing on the moon. When we did away with Tab and brought in Diet Coke, that was it.
That's right.
Well, get this. Not only is this a great story for Trump and his team, but it's a great story about how different things are this time around with this inauguration. Donald Trump was presented yesterday a special commemorative presidential inauguration commemorative Diet Coke bottle.
Yeah.
It was presented by the Coca-Cola chairman and the CEO, James Quincy, last night at Mar-a-Lago. And it features a special label that reads, "The inauguration of the President of the United States," with Trump's name and the date, January 20th, 2025. And the smile on Trump's face, it's like, this is the greatest thing you can give him. Honestly, I don't think anything will be a more prized possession than this special bottle of Diet Coke.
Yeah, and just not to be. Look, this is a happy story. This is a great story, but I think this is worth noting. Tim Graham, our friend Tim Graham, over at Newsbusters, he made this point on X, saying, if this were any other president, the media would go crazy for this. They would, be covering this. All these happy, fun stories about this. So I'm glad we're covering it because it is a fun story.
Yeah. No, in the media, well, if the media does cover it, it'll be the boycott against Coca-Cola that will begin immediately. Also, good thing he got this before Robert F. Kennedy Jr. became Secretary of Health and Human Services, because that will be confiscated immediately. Yes. Joining us next, Cal Thomas. Keep it here.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now. Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:37 here on O'Connor and Company, and we are winding down to Inauguration Day. These are the waning days of the Biden administration, or as Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, football coach, would say, we're in the final quarter of the game. It's the bottom of the ninth, and we're ready to hit a touchdown. Or something like that. Coming up later in this program at 7:05, Matt Whitlock, Republican strategist, on yesterday's confirmation hearings for Pete Hegseth. And at 8:35, Christian Toto, as we just mentioned, film critic. We'll talk about how the Reagan movie is ineligible for Oscars because it wasn't DEI woke enough. Because that's what wins awards. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Joining us right now is the one, the only, the inimitable, the award-winning, syndicated columnist, Cal Thomas. It's another inauguration. Cal, I just looked at the temperatures. It's predicted to be 25 degrees on the Mall at noon on Monday. What will you be wearing at the inauguration?
Well, Larry, with all of those politicians gathered in one place and the hot air that comes from it, I think it could be a balmy 65 degrees.
That's fair enough. You're going to be there in your Aloha shirt and flip-flops.
Well, I've been to these before, and this is the worst one of all if you're going to go live because of the security, and you're going to be so far away, you're going to need binoculars. So I'm going to sit in my new comfortable apartment in Arlington with a wonderful view of the Capitol and Reagan Airport. Aww. And having a nice warm beverage and watching it all on a big TV screen.
Well, you're doing
wonderful.
it right. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Cal, I mentioned that these are the waning days of the Biden presidency, and he's kind of going out with a bit of a whimper. I guess probably the fires in California are putting a damper on a lot of the pageantry that he would have liked to have performed. But he did give a speech at the State Department this week that claimed that he's leaving Trump a safer world than he inherited by any objective measure. That's just the biggest lie of the year already.
It is indeed. And you look at the Middle East, you look at Afghanistan, the disastrous pullout, no closer to victory there or any kind of a settlement. He hasn't done anything that has promoted the general welfare of anybody. And the people know it. And that's one reason why over 70 million voted for Trump to return him to the White House. And a Gallup poll conducted last month found that Americans rank Biden far beneath Presidents Trump, Barack Obama, and George Bush on critical foreign and domestic policy issues. So he can talk all he wants, and he just announced, or it was just announced, he's going to address the nation with a farewell address tonight. I hope he stays awake because, after 4 o'clock it gets a little dicey.
Yeah.
Cal, Democrats certainly are avoiding that issue, as we saw yesterday during the Hegseth hearing. They asked almost no questions about the world and our military readiness. Instead, they focused on personal questions about Pete Hegseth. But what were your thoughts? I'm sure you watched that hearing. Gosh, it was must-see TV. What were your thoughts?
Well, I just love that when Democrats bring up things like sexual behavior and divorces. I mean, what do we talk? You hear Senator Kaine, who ran with Hillary Clinton,
right,
who states the biggest cover-ups of Bill Clinton's sexual behavior. I mean, come on. I loved what Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican from Oklahoma, said. He said, Senator Kaine starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? Yeah. How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Now, I happen to have known, at least you're not a senator, Larry. I happen to know the late physician to the U.S. Senate, and he told me stories that I couldn't believe about how many senators during his time 20 years ago showed up drunk. He mentioned John Tower, who, of course, senator from Texas, who was barred from, who did not win enough votes to become Secretary of Defense, primarily because of his drinking problem. But there were others as well. And so to bring up this kind of stuff for Pete Hegseth, and you're right, the Democrats didn't talk almost anything at all about China, about our defense capabilities. But when the Republicans asked him about our hardware and submarines and readiness and woke and standards different for women than for men, he was right on. He was right there with the right answers.
So it's impossible to talk to you, Cal, without pointing out the culture in Washington, D.C., since you were a denizen of the Beltway for so many years. And the Redskins, their success and their failures really is a reflection of the mood of the people who live here. So the fact that the Redskins won their first playoff game, the Commanders, the Command Skins, call them what you will, I don't care.
Yeah.
Burgundy and gold. They won their first playoff game in 20 years, and I've noticed there is a palpable spring in people's steps here, and you're seeing burgundy and gold on the streets, every block of this town. Why do the Redskins have such an impact on Washington?
It is a great question, Larry, and it is unique to our city. I mean, I was born there. I grew up when the Washington Senators weren't doing anything. First in war, first in peace, last in the American League. Remember that line? Probably not. You're too young. But Washington, which fights about everything all the time, name-calling, everything else, the sports teams, especially this wonderful football team, and especially this incredible quarterback, Jaden Daniels, a fabulous coach, and the new ownership, say goodbye forever to Daniel Snyder, thank God, is the only thing that brings us together. You remember Dallas Week, where that's all that anybody could talk about. Forget politics, forget the potholes in the road. We're going to kill Dallas. Well, now we're in the playoffs for the first time in over a decade, 20 years, whatever it's been, and it's exciting. It's bringing the town together again, even in the midst of the inauguration where Democrats, and including Michelle Obama, say they're not showing up, which is really pathetic. But I think it's wonderful. And even if they lose to the Lions, which I'm not sure they will, we've got a team that we can be proud of.
Well, there's nothing but upside for the Redskins or the Command Skins, that's for sure, especially with the rookie quarterback. And even if they don't make, and it's hard to get through Ford Field in Detroit. Even if they don't win, honestly, it looks like a Super Bowl is on the radar within the next couple of years, easily.
Yep.
It's fun.
Watch for those ticket prices to go up next year too.
Oh, you don't care? You'll still be sitting in your warm living room watching it on a big television. Come on, who are you kidding?
Absolutely. I can do my own
Thanks, Cal.
replays. All right, bye.
Happy Inauguration Week. It is 6:40.
Weeknights with Mark Levin, 6 to 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
President-elect Trump made a bold statement yesterday that moves towards a very comprehensive approach to tariffs. People who are concerned about tariffs and how they might affect imports and our economy, they often say, well, listen, Trump is just using this as a threat. It's a negotiating tactic, and maybe targeted tariffs here and there will make sense. But it does seem that President-elect Trump is moving forward with a much more comprehensive approach to tariffs. And to that end, Julie Gunlock, yesterday he announced he's going to create the External Revenue Service, the ERS, to collect tariffs, duties, and revenue that come from foreign sources. I'm assuming that there was a Department of the Treasury that handled all of these things, but it wasn't consolidated into something called external revenue. And yeah, you know what? It would be nice to sort of focus on foreign countries and foreigners paying tariffs and taxes to do business with this country instead of putting so much focus on enforcing the law against we U.S. citizens, to making sure that they squeeze every dime out of us.
Absolutely right. I mean, this is a really innovative idea. He says for far too long, we have relied on taxing our great people using the IRS. Through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements, the American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It's time for that to change. I love these ideas. I love innovative tax policies like this, and again, looking elsewhere. You know, we also have to remember that a lot of both legal and illegal immigrants come into this country. They work, and then they send all the money home. Okay, they send all the money back home. They don't spend it here. They don't. Many of them don't pay taxes. So again, why not look for other sources of revenue?
E.J. Antoni of Heritage Foundation, good guy and a smart conservative economist. He said, I really, really love this idea. Two reallys from E.J. Antoni. I would just say this. Like I said, obviously we are getting tariffs now in a limited way, and we're getting fees and everything. It's being collected by some agency somewhere. By creating this ERS, please, President Trump and the incoming transition team, eliminate the current department that has this. We keep building and making new departments, and we never get rid of the old departments.
You're right. Yeah.
So let's not expand the footprint of the federal government and then have redundancy. If we're going to do this, and I think it's a good idea, get rid of whatever agency's been doing it up until
don't
this
forget
point.
DOGE is there, okay, to look at
Thank you.
overlap and duplication. What frustrates me about DOGE, as I've said, and it frustrates me about all these, that's Congress's job to get rid of overlap and duplication. They don't do it, so don't forget DOGE is there to do that for you.